Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My apologies for our previous meeting went a little bit late. I'm glad we're going. I do want to begin the meeting, though, with an acknowledgement of the staff and volunteers that put together an amazing Canada Day celebration for Coquitlam. I'm wearing my Canada tie, and we had an absolutely great celebration of Canada Day. The entire day was excellent in so many regards, and put together by staff and by volunteers and by all the community groups that participated. And there's no question that the fireworks take two was excellent, and by all accounts, and so there's a lot of people to be thanked, including Cressy, the sponsor of the fireworks. But at the end of the day, it was the people of Coquitlam that came out and celebrated this great nation, and I want to acknowledge, on behalf of Council, everybody that put that together. Great day. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item on the agenda is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, June 25th. Recommendation to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Robinson. Reamer. All in favour. Opposed. Oops, Councillor Reamer.
Well, thank you. I wanted to thank the members of my Multiculturalism Advisory Committee who came out on Canada Day and did many shifts. And this is one of the items right here that we produced. Many of the people who attended Canada Day, we had started out by asking them to answer a question, and the question was, how can we be welcoming? And it turned out that people just really wanted to put their thoughts about our great city in Coquitlam, and so you have that in the leaves here of this tree, and it turned out to be a fabulous idea. And also like to thank Robin Newton as well for all the organization that she put into that booth on Canada Day. Thank you.
I love the sentiments on the leaves, things like Canada is great, I love my country, and make the process simpler. And I don't know where that one comes from. But apparently, right at the top, you look at it right at the top, the yellow one. Make the process simpler. The child is going to be part of our deregulation committee later. Thank you very much. I'm going to repeat. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the public hearing by Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, June 25th. Recommendation to approve.
Move approval.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is fourth and final reading of Parking Management Amendment Bylaw 4324. The recommendation is the council give fourth and final reading of Parking Management Amendment Bylaw 4324.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I just had a question on the rates and everything that's outlined in the report. And I was wondering, does the city of Coquitlam give an exemption on parking to veterans? I know that some cities, such as New Westminster, give veterans free parking, those that have the special veterans plates. And I'm just wondering if we have a similar program for parking at meters and at public facilities.
Your Worship, my understanding is that it may well be on a lot-by-lot basis. I am aware that the enforcement staff do not ticket, for example, Veterans Place at the Aquatic Center, but I'm not certain that there is an overall blanket recognition of that fact. So Council may want to adopt a resolution to the effect of granting, a citywide pay parking exemptions for those with veteran plates.
No, it's just a question. My understanding is that in New Westminster, it's done on an annual basis, and it's a motion by council to do it. So I wasn't suggesting we make the change. It was just a question if it was in place or if it's something that as we move to more widespread parking management, that's something that down the road that we want to look at, because I think it certainly would have its merits. But I'd be interested in staff and knowing more if we don't have that program, if something has been contemplated.
Sure. Thanks, Your Worship. We will be reporting out on more parking management issues, obviously. We intend to do that either late this year or early next year, and we can address that as part of the policy work for that report. Just top of mind, there may well be two groups that we might want to look at. One is the disabled community, and the other is the veterans. So we will cover both of those aspects.
Great, thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, the motion is fourth and final. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Asmussen.
Yes, I'll be excusing myself on the next item. I've excused myself before for a perceived potential conflict. Thank you.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, Mayor, I really got a problem. When a council member that's so far away from this development can excuse himself and keeps excusing himself on many issues that are quite a ways away from his home. I don't know what it is, but I don't see any conflict of whatsoever. I don't see any problems with what's happening with this development. I don't know. It just seems to be excusing himself on things that, you know, I think he ought to be here. So, Mayor, I think it's up to you, Mayor, to maybe have a talk with him. Would you please? Because frankly, I'll tell you something, I think it's unnecessary what he's doing. Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate you've raised that sentiment before. It is always up to a council member as to whether or not he attends a vote on a matter, and Councillor Asmussen has been consistent that matters close to his home, because of the potential for a perception of conflict, he absents himself. In this case, I believe this is about 4 houses away from his property, so it is proximate. But it is not up to me, and I can't. Council can't order him to vote. I can't order him to vote.
And Mayor, I understand what you're saying, but the fact is, there's no way financially he can gain by this or lose anything by this. I mean, you know. So I mean, I don't know why he'd be excusing himself, and I just feel that it's. Maybe show and tell for the audience here in this room, but that's about all that I can say. Because frankly, there's no excuse for him to excuse himself on these issues. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I have actually excused myself because a family member owned a piece of property across the street. There was no way, realistically, that I could have benefited, but for the perception of that conflict of interest, there is no question that a vote on this matter could affect the property that Councillor Asmussen lives on, because it would affect the likelihood of a rezoning application in the future. He has taken the abundance of caution approach, and I can't find fault with him, and I certainly can't order him not to. So, but thank you again for raising the concern. And now,
Item 4 is the authorization for the issuance of a development variance permit for 3476 Wilkie Avenue. Prior to putting the recommendation on the floor, I would ask Your Worship to call for speakers.
we can't do that yet. This is a development variance permit application, and we have a mini public hearing. So are there any speakers of this item? I see that there is one registered as the applicant. He may or may not wish to speak, but is there anyone who wishes to speak on this? The applicant's name is Don Stubbard or Tim Stubbard. You don't have to speak, but you can. Okay, come forward, please. And his address is 3449 Sydney Crescent, Railroad 8 in Armstrong.
Mayor, councillors, administration, thank you for having me here. We've come a long way, and it's a beautiful day. And I just want to give you some of the understanding about my brother and the situation of whether administration has actually filled you on all aspects of it. But I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So far at this point, the collective amount of money that's been put together for professionals to put this together as a development that chimes in with the balance of that block has been almost $40,000, based on extensive communication between planning and the professionals that were involved, including the fisheries of Fish and Oceans of BC. which gave approval for all of the setbacks and the lines that were drawn for the building envelope and the aspect of the design that was been now altered to literally affect the council's last decision, which was to reverse it and ask for another design, which has been done by another at another cost for us. The lot's been held for some 20 to 25 years. It's a beautiful piece, can really be very well done. I've walked the property myself. I've seen what the arborist has done for the trees that have been supposed to have been left. I see nothing but an advantage for the ability for a man to be able to sell this lot in his retirement ages, which is basically what he was trying to keep it as for what he could afford to be able to be retired at this point, and he's counting on this. So to hold a piece of property that long and then to be refused by council or by Board of Variance at this point when $40,000 extra has been spent, and I hope you understand, it's, I mean, my brother's 76 years old, and he's tried to show his best in earnest to be able to comply with everything from planning, and everything's been provided so far. He has gracefully and been given those things, and everybody here, I hope, has been informed by administration as to the extent. There is nothing left to dot, there's nothing left to cross. Everything has been complied with. At this point, you know, I would suggest that I would really appeal to the idea that you would show your hearts in this particular case, show some understanding about what we have done to go on. I was a builder and designer down here for 25 years. And so seeing the potential and what planning is trying to do with keeping the existing zoning, but complying with what's required for the new zoning to look a certain way, has been done exponentially. It's been very well received by the designer and by, so far, by the administration. So in closing, I'd really like to have you feel this into your heart. I'd really like to have you understand that this is a man that's begging for everything he possibly can for you to see it in a very common light of bringing this whole thing together for Coquitlam so it is a much more beautified area, and to do the very best on a lot that is very difficult and very environmentally sensitive. So thank you again, Mayor, Council, Administration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers to this item? Mr. Peachman, please come forward.
Shane Peachman, 3469 Wilkie Avenue. I would like to thank the City of Coquitlam for listening to the neighbors' concerns about the proposed housing development on 3476 Wilkie Avenue, especially in regard to the original house design with a suite, and requested numerous variants on a small restricted building envelope attached adjacent to West Smiling Creek. I would like to thank especially the planning and the environmental department, who I've had numerous conversations about it, for limiting the size of the house on this environmentally sensitive area of West Smiling Creek that has coho salmon spawning and breeding in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Peachman, you support the current proposal?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. The answer was yes. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time. Any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, we'll declare the development permit hearing, a variance permit hearing closed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation is that Council approve the development variance permit for 3476 Wilkie Avenue, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by everybody and seconded by Councillor Nicholson. I'll go with Councillor Secor. It was mover. Councillor Hodge.
Sorry? Okay, I didn't know where you go. You know, when I looked at this request originally, and I went out and I walked the property, and when I spoke on this initially, and I listed sort of three words that came to mind. One was expectations, the expectation of the builder and the expectation of the neighbors. The other was challenges, and this lot certainly presented challenges. And the other was compromise and the need to compromise. And so I'm happy to see that the expectations for this lot have been lowered. I think that this proposal addresses the challenges there, and it's still a challenging lot, but I believe that the house is proposed, the development is proposed, will be able to be done on that property, and I think more importantly that it shows a compromise, and it shows a compromise by the owner, realizing that there are significant challenges on that lot, and by lowering their expectation and compromising, that they brought forward a plan that, in my view, is doable, and I'm happy to see that something can be built there, and respecting the challenges and the terrain of that lot. So I'm prepared to support the new application.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the changes that have been made, and I can support the application as it stands. Always wanting to learn something new. It doesn't really affect how I'm going to vote, but I'm curious as to whether staff can suggest why the applicant wouldn't rezone to RS7, developing in accordance with, effectively with RS7.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think at the start of the day, it was felt to be a fairly straightforward issue situation. There's a development variance permit process. That's taken a little while to get to the conclusion of that. The sense was we really need to complicate matters by layering on a rezoning as well, and it was understood that the design would work towards the RS7. In fact, in this case, I think they're bang on with just about all the parameters of that. So doing a rezoning would be almost superfluous and an additional expense and time timeline for the property owner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. There's nothing like starting this off with lots of gratitude from residents as well as from the family for the hard work of our staff. So I'm going to add my 2 cents, because this was a challenging one to make a decision on, and I'm going to support it because I do think it's a better design for that particular site. It respects sort of all elements of the site and all the challenges of the site. And so my support is not because I feel bad for the applicant, but because I think it's a better design, and it's for the community. And so I'm looking forward to supporting it. And I thank you, Mr. Stewart, and your team for making the compromise that Councillor Hodge spoke to, and finding a better solution, and hearing from Mr. Peachman that this does meet the needs of the community. So I want to thank everyone all around.
Thank you. I had one question. I don't know that it can be answered without the applicant taking the microphone again. I'm not. For some reason, the garage has been put at the highest end of the lot, which raised the height of the building by probably half a meter. And I note that the extra 2 or 3 risers on that long staircase to the front door. I mean, why would the garage have been put at the high end of the lot and not the low end of the lot? Given that we're only talking a basement space. Any ideas? Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, I don't know precisely because I didn't deal directly with the application, but I would note that with the setback lines from the watercourse that sort of cuts diagonally through that southwest corner of the building envelope, so in that, it dictates sort of a step in that area of the building design and foundation. So shifting the garage over to that area would makes it less efficient, I guess, in the use of that space. By having the garage at the front, you can then, the more valuable sides of the dwelling, I suggest, would be the south and west sides, so you'd have your windows there, access to the outdoors. So rather than making that for the garage, you'd make that for the habitable areas. There's probably a number of design parameters that have set having the garage shifted towards the front of the building.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, I'm pleased with the adjustments, and I'm pleased with the staff recommendation that we move forward. There was a couple of comments that the applicant's brother made urging us to have compassion. I'll tell you, I heard in council at the original application compassion, but I also heard the weight of good public policy and the weight of the challenging site and the environmental conditions on this site, and the comments from other people And so I'm glad that we're able to find a resolution that I think is going to be quite a nice home. And I appreciate it very much, all the work that has undoubtedly been gone through. I'll be supporting. Seeing no other speakers. Okay, the motion is the issuance of a DVP. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Congratulations.
The next item, item 5, is a preliminary report on zoning amendment bylaw 4325 for a proposed subdivision at 3510 Highland Drive. The recommendation is council give first reading, see Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4325 for 3510 Highland Drive, and refer this bylaw to public hearing.
Second. Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Robinson.
I just want to say thank you to staff for the pedestrian corridor pictures.
What did she thank you for?
Pedestrian corridor pictures.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? What a beautiful pedestrian corridor. Thank you.
Item 6 is a conservation permit for Mosaic Como Lake 2 Holdings Limited at 618 Como Lake Avenue. The recommendation is council approve the issuance of the conservation permit with conditions and that for the property located at 618 Como Lake Avenue.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just through to engineering, what kind of dust control mitigation do you have there? With the dry weather, it's going to be deadly.
Sure. Your Worship, typical control would be to have the contractor lay down water on a constant basis if necessary. I mean, thanks for the comment, and we'll be on the lookout for that through our inspection services.
Well, because it's a very constrained site as well, so I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Does Metro's new watering restrictions have any?
Yeah, they do.
If there were a problem, Your Worship, we would seek an exemption. I don't think that would count.
Yep. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 pertains to welcoming communities funding. This is for an expression of interest, and the recommendation that council authorize the mayor to sign and submit on the city's behalf a letter entitled Welcoming Communities Funding Expression of Interest in response to a request from the BC Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Innovation.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I think this is a fabulous opportunity and a win-win all around. And it speaks to the ability as a community for one group to sort of leverage money that, you know, we benefit from. And I think when I think about where we sit at community tables, I think this is an example of why it's a good thing for us to do. When we sit together at these community tables and one group can bring in some funds that helps to benefit other groups, I think we need to be thinking more in that vein, because it allows us to do a better job with less resource, and we all know that we have to do more with less. And I think this is a perfect example for that. So I'm thrilled to see this come forward.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I, too, am very happy to see this come forward and fully support it. There's 3 municipalities that sit on Tri-City Planning Partnership, and doing this all together and with our other partner groups as well makes huge sense. It's a great use of resources, and it will benefit the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. So that's it. We've been unanimous so far. We should be pretty much done. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, there's one more item. Quick.
I think that requires the knocking of wood. Item 8 is the Firearm and Bow Discharge Bylaw 4266 and Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 4278. Recommendations that Council amend the Firearm and Bow Discharge Bylaw 4266 as follows. To allow an exemption from the requirements to the Port Coquitlam and District Hunting and Fishing Club property on Harper Road, an exemption from the requirements to the Swiss Canadian Mountain Range Association on Quarry Road, to allow the discharge of firearm in those areas as shown in Schedule A attached to the bylaw.
May I ask for separation, Your Worship?
As soon as he's finished reading them.
Oh, sorry.
Sure, no joke.
Thought he was.
Amend Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 4278 by removing references to all bylaws other than the Firearm and Bow Discharge Bylaw 4266. Give fourth and final reading to the City of Coquitlam Firearm and Bow Discharge Bylaw 4266 as amended, and fourth and final reading to Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 4278 as amended.
Okay. I will impose the separation of these because I suspect everyone's going to want it anyway. Is there a mover? It will be separated. They're not on the floor yet. Anyone going to move them?
Sure.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Nicholson. Seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Item 1 only. Amend the firearm bylaw for 3 exemptions. Does anyone want the exemptions separated?
Yes, I'd like C separated.
Okay. A and B are 2 essentially shooting clubs, target practice clubs. Any comments on the target practice? Everything's on the floor. We're just dealing with the target practice. Anyone have a discussion on that? Please put your hand up. Seeing none. All in favor of A and B? Opposed? We're unanimous still.
We're getting there.
All right. On C, I have a speakers list. Councillor Reid.
I only wanted for separation.
Okay. The motions are separated. Councillor Reamer.
I actually didn't really want to speak on this. I support it.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill on C.
Yes. And C, just to be clear, is the allowance of the discharge of firearms in the Addington Marsh area and on Goose Island. And I'm so glad that this amendment is now being suggested to the earlier bylaw, because I think we heard long and loud from people about the benefits of allowing this from an environmental point of view, from a sporting point of view. And we also heard that there have been no problems associated with this. You might recall at a committee meeting several weeks ago, or maybe months ago, that I declared that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this was something that wasn't broken. And yet we were attempting in that earlier bylaw to ban the discharge of firearms on Goose Island and Addington Marsh. So I am in complete support of the amendment to the bylaw that will now allow the discharge of firearms in those 2 areas.
Okay. Councillor Robinson on the in agreement. Go ahead.
I am not in agreement with C and won't be supporting C. Hunting is a rural or wilderness activity. And we ain't the rural community that we once were, and we certainly ain't the wilderness anymore. We've got Evergreen Line coming in. We've got 30,000 people moving into Burke Mountain, which is this backyard to this neighborhood, and I really don't think it's what our residents want. And I sit here representing our residents, not a special interest group. I represent our residents. And so I am not going to support it because that's what I believe our residents want. I also will question, and I'm fine for people to hunt, especially if they're hunting for food. Absolutely, go and hunt for food as long as you're using the entire animal. That's fabulous. But I often question, and Councillor O'Neill talked about that. This is sport, and it's like I have more sport hunting for a good shoe sale than I would imagine that they do hunting for a goose on Goose Island. So I'm not sure that it's sport, but I do think that I don't think it's communing with nature because I don't think they're in the wilderness. So I'm not comfortable again with the idea of the interface between our residents who will all be out there recreating, and the discharge of firearms in our city. I also think that we're going to be burdening future councils with having to make this decision. I think the day is coming, and I think we need to have the courage to say the day is now. If this doesn't pass, I just think a future council is going to have to deal with it, because I do think there will be complaints, and I do think there will be some concerns, and I will be one to say I told you so. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I am going to be supporting C. We heard loud and clear from the hunting community. We've also just received a letter from our Coquitlam Ratepayers Association saying their members are divided on the matter of hunting or crossbow usage on Goose Island. And so with that, I agree with what Councillor O'Neill has said. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. We have had absolutely no complaints. I did check with the RCMP on that. And I also did check with our MLA and found out that 900 Coquitlam residents have firearms hunting license, pardon me. And so if we had some reported incidents, I would have supported a ban here, but we have not. And the hunters, in order to qualify to hunt, have to have both a federal, a provincial, and a Fraser Valley license. And they are highly trained, they understand the rules, and as a rule, they don't break those rules. I do have a question, though, because we're dealing with the exemptions here in this section number 1. I do have a question with respect to an email that I received early this morning, which showed some emails between our staff and Ministry of Forest and Resources staff, which indicated that there was some brief discussion about possibly allowing an area of exemption for bow hunters in Pinecone Burke. And so my question for staff is why you obviously made the decision not to bring that forward to us. I don't believe I'd seen those emails previously, and just wondering about that.
Mr. Suzak.
Sure. Your Worship, I guess we'll go back to the original notice of motion, which really, from my recollection, was fairly clear on banning the use of the bow and arrow. So we have stuck to that. I'll ask Mr. Kusi to comment. We have heard from the bow hunting community during the public hearing that they have concerns about it. We made a decision to just go with the status quo, if you will, that is, stick with the council notice of motion.
Okay.
And that's what's before you.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have, in our previous report, and I believe it was provided to us with respect to the public hearing that we had on this, there were some 6 or 7 incidences that were outlined of the use of bows that had injured both deer and bear. I'm just wondering where we obtained that information from.
Thank you, Your Worship. That was from the Conservation Service and to some extent the RCMP, but we could confirm that. I believe they were all confirmed by the Conservation Service.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's Vern Kusi. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I come back to a point that I think I made one of the first times that we talked about this, and I look at the restriction on the map. It says, in this crosshatched area, only shotguns and no discharge towards shore. There is hardly anywhere in that crosshatched area that I can imagine you discharging a shotgun anywhere other than towards shore, unless you put it straight up in the air and tried to bring the moon down. And I think Councillor Robinson's quite right. It's a recreational area. We're not the District of Coquitlam of 1965. This is the City of Coquitlam in 2012. We're a city. We have people all over the place, and more and more and more of them. And while it might be okay today, it certainly won't be okay the day after tomorrow. So I can't support the exemption provided in C. Thank you.
Thank you. My own thoughts are that we started this with a notice of motion to protect bears from being shot by bows on farms. We ended up with a report and a bylaw that has nothing to do with farms and doesn't prevent bears from being shot on farms. On the weekend, I went for a couple of bike rides with family members on the Beauville Slough and around Minnetonka. On one of the trips, we saw 5 bears in the blueberry fields. So I can understand the frustration that the blueberry farmers, the blueberries aren't ripe yet, but the blueberry farmers must be incredibly frustrated that, and those are just the 5 bears that we saw. But in the end, the shooting of bears on the farm will still be permitted. And the shooting of bears by bows arguably will still be permitted, even though we have pretended, or perhaps we've asserted that we have a right to define what you're allowed to shoot the bears with under the Right to Farm Act. And I suspect a challenge, well, I won't deal with the legal issues of that, but in the end, we ended up dealing with a bylaw that dealt with everything, almost everything but bears on farms. And because we're still left powerless to do what the notice of motion originally was trying to do, which was to protect the bears from being shot by bows. And then there was a comment made by 2 councillors that the day is coming. The day is coming, and I agree, the day is coming when there will be no more hunting in the Lower Mainland, for that matter. But I'm not sure the day is here yet, and I don't know that it's my duty to say, well, one day it will be appropriate to ban hunting, so today it's appropriate to ban hunting, or one day it will be appropriate for us to have SkyTrain out to wherever, therefore today we ought to have it. In the end, today, the decision has to be made about whether or not Goose Island is appropriate for goose hunting. Again, the last couple of weeks I've been out to the Pitt River and seen Goose Island, which has mostly disappeared because of the spring freshet. The water is quite higher, quite a bit higher. And it's completely different from the way Goose Island looks in the winter, which is a very desolate, very distant island that until this debate started, none of council had been out there or knew that there was hunting activities in Pitt Addington Marsh or on Goose Island, and hadn't been affected. And we've heard from lots of people that said this isn't a risk. There's no risk whatsoever that a shot will get to the shore. Even if you shot it directly at the shore at the appropriate angle to make it to shore, it would make it a third of the way and then it would fall into the water. So this isn't about risks. This isn't about risks to the public. I think this is about perception as to whether or not the day has come. And since both of those council members said the day isn't here yet, but it is coming, I'm still struggling with how anyone could say, well, we can ignore those intervening years between recognizing the day is coming and having the day arrive. Right now, the day isn't here yet. I suspect it will come, but in the meantime, we need to balance what we're doing, and so I'm going to support the Schedule A exemptions set out in the bylaw. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I will not be supporting them. I don't know if I'm quite concerned about the Addington Marsh more than Goose Island, to be honest with you, and that would be my main reason. I thank staff, though. I think you guys have done an admirable job, and I have to tell you, we had this conversation not long ago at Metro in one of the committees I'm on about outdated legislation and outdated bylaws and things like that. And yes, our bylaw went way beyond where we started out. I don't think anyone can disagree. But sometimes these things happen for a reason, and we started with something that was outdated, and I think we've brought it up to this century and this time and now. So the Addington Marsh really concerns me, and I will not be supporting it. But I thank staff for doing a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, I'll echo that on behalf of council. Staff have done a great job managing this thing, and that has given enough time for Councillor Hodge to push his button, so I will now refer it over to
Councillor Hodge.
No, and I just want to say, I live up in the area, and I am seeing the change, and I'm not so sure that the change is that far off. More and more people are moving into the northeast. It's becoming their backyard. It's where they go to recreate. And I didn't know about Goose Island. I've lived here for over 40 years in the area. But I do know of Addington Marsh. And I have a concern because that's on the main part of Coquitlam. We're seeing more and more people walking up into those areas. And, the way I look at it, I think the little figure I heard was that 95% of the province is open to hunting. And, and I'm sort of looking at, well, maybe it's time that Coquitlam become part of the 5% that isn't. I'm not really that concerned about Goose Island. It's half the time it's underwater. You don't see it. It's off into the middle of the river, and the boundary between us and Pitt Meadows, if it had been another 150 meters the other way, Goose Island wouldn't even be being discussed tonight. But I do have concerns about the Addington Marsh, and so it's a case of I really can't support hunting in that part of Coquitlam. I believe the day has come now, and that with the people moving in, they expect that to be able to live in a city now that is a city, and it's not a district anymore. And as I said, I can't support hunting in the Addington Marsh area. I think we have a long history, and I recognize the history of the area, but things have changed today, and I think the hunters are responsible, but I think it's time for them to move on into the wilderness further out. They are as much a victim as some of the wildlife in our community. Is that our community has changed, our land use has changed, and they're going to have to move farther out into the woods now to pursue the sport that they enjoy. And this, to me, it's not about hunting. It's about land use and appropriate use of land within the city. And as I said, I'm more concerned about the marsh than Goose Island. But the way the exemption is, they're tied together, and so I have to say I don't want the hunting on the marsh.
Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you. This has been quite a process, and I think a lot of us have grown from the information we've had here. I've been able to understand the issue a greater deal in this issue. I think C is appropriate this time. I think Goose Island, from what we've learned and been told, that the shot to shore in Coquitlam won't reach the shore. The distance going over to Pitt Meadows is so great that it is not of concern. The marsh area, the hiking in there, the hunting in there is generally November through February. It's at the time of winter when it's not conducive for a lot of people to be out there. But I think people also have to understand that our developed area, our growth containment boundary, stops prior to Gillies Trail. This whole area is wilderness protected area, will always be a wilderness area. It's not going to be people living in that area. While people may recreate out there, I don't think the time that the hunting is going on will be there. I do think, though, that these issues need to be managed, and I do think it would be worthwhile that through staff or whatever, that we liaise or have a committee to work with concerns of the hunting community, people in here, to monitor and manage this as we move forward. I think that would be a good way to proactively deal with this situation as we move forward. If we have to exclude in a future time the marsh, maybe possibly in Goose Island, but I think, as Mayor Stewart said, we're nowhere near that time yet. And if this hadn't have been about a bear being shot on a blueberry farm, we wouldn't even be here talking about Goose Island or Widgeon Marsh, because nothing ever happened. It has never been raised as a concern ever, and now we're lumping that into this. I mean, the other issue is, and I'm not going to make the change now, but when you look at the developed area, and we have Burke Pine Cone Lake Regional Park, and our boundary extends up to the lakes up there, which is a huge area, which is also going to be banned, where there'll be nobody in that area for a long time for bow hunting, and it's a completely restricted area. There's no development ever going to happen there, and you've got kilometers of area in there that is wilderness. But we are going to have that ban go through there. So it's not perfect, and I think that's where a committee being struck with interested parties can help manage this on a longer-term issue and give us a better handle on it. But I do think we sort of jumped the gun without having proper information at the beginning. And I think Mayor Stewart said it, we're not really achieving what we originally wanted to set out and achieve as the shooting of a bear on a blueberry farm. And we're left with this that seems to divert into a whole other area that was never, ever, ever raised as a concern by anybody until this motion came forward. There's never been complaints down on the marsh or anything down there. I know people that live down in that area and have no problem with this, and they're there all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. You know, this thing has been around the mulberry bush, and I think it's time to put it to bed. I mean, it's long overdue. The fact is, there's been changes made. And the other day, somebody asked me, he said, can anybody guarantee me that you wouldn't see a bear with a bow in his neck or a deer? I said, two things that I can guarantee you. You're going to pay taxes and you're going to die. That's two things I can guarantee. You know, but anything else you can't guarantee. And after this bylaw passes, which it looks like it will, the fact is there a guarantee that somebody wouldn't shoot a deer or a bear with a bow and arrow? For sure. It's going to happen, whether it be this year, next year, year after. Sometimes in the future it's going to happen. And will we know who did it? No, I don't think so. Unless you're next to the guy that's shooting it, you know. So, you know, I think that we need to put this to bed, Mayor. I think we need to get on with it and pass this bylaw. Thank you.
There's a motion like that on the floor. I just saw it. Anybody else? Saying none. The motion is C, to allow discharge in Schedule A lands. All in favor? Opposed? Councillors Reid, Nicholson, Hodge, and Robinson are opposed. The motion carries. Now it's recommendation number 2. That was one A through C. Recommendation 2 is amend the bylaw to bring that into effect. This is bylaw 4278 and 4266. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay. I should be letting the clerk read these out because he'll be more comfortable.
No opposition to that was expressed.
Okay. And number 3, give fourth and final reading to 4266. All in favor? Oops. Councillor O'Neill on 4266.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just address this very quickly, if I could. When first we talked about this issue, and first I actually wrote about it before I was even elected, I was talking about the unintended consequence of banning bow and arrows on farms that would lead to people using more guns on farms, which was probably going to be more dangerous. That would still technically be the case here, but I'm not as concerned about it now because I really have the same interpretation of the Right to Farm Act as the Mayor does, that it's debatable whether or not we actually have the power to ban the use of bow and arrows on farms. I know this bylaw will say that that's the case, and we've got an interpretation that that's the case, but you know, I think you can read the Right to Farm Act different ways, and it may well be a challenge. So I'm not really sure about that. The other thing we heard from during with all the letters we received and at the public meeting was the use of bow and arrows, especially in the Pinecone-Burke Provincial Park. And this, as Councillor Asmundson said, this bylaw would ban that as well as everywhere else. I'm going to say that I'm not going to oppose this bylaw because I think it's more important and better public policy for us to ensure that the firearm discharge can continue to occur on Goose Island and in the Addington Marsh. And I think that that's the most important thing that we have to move forward with. Burke Mountain, Pinecone-Burke Provincial Park there is part of it in the city boundary, but it's maybe only 1/6 or 1/7 of the entire mass, maybe even less than that. So for those few bow hunters that will get caught up in this, there's plenty of opportunity for them to go further north, all along Pitt Lake, all the way to the top of it. Pinecone Brook Provincial Park is a very large area. The southern end of it is within Coquitlam, and that's where this bow hunting will be banned. And so, you know, I've learned a lot about this in the discussion, the debate. Councillor Asmundson talked about that as well, and I agree. You know, and it's been a tremendous exercise in public policy making, and we've all heard a lot, and we've all had to think about this a lot. And I want to thank the staff for bringing forward what they brought forward now. I think it's the best compromise, so I'm going to be supporting it.
Okay. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I too am going to be supporting this bylaw. It's not perfect, and I do feel badly for those who do legitimately hunt with bows and arrows in that more remote section of Pinecone Burke. The thing is, I think we have to figure that I'm going to support this, but I'm also going to say that there is a chance that some of the people who have done what they've done by injuring bears and injuring deer with the use of a bow and arrow are probably, they may not respect our bylaws, because I don't think that they've really respected the rules of hunting. And so I will support this. I also question whether or not the Right to Farm Act stipulates whether bows and arrows are considered normal farm practice. I did see in the Right to Farm Act, it does stipulate that those bylaws under the community charter, and it references firearms and other weapons in the community charter as being exempted from the usual community charter rules. So that tells me that perhaps bows can still be used on farm to protect a farmer's crops. So anyway, all in all, this has been a very interesting proposal, and I am going to support it. We did have the 6 or 7 documented incidents of bear and deer being injured, and for that reason I do believe that we have to do this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So 4266 as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Nicholson's opposed. Motion carries. And fourth and final reading to 4278 as amended. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief pertaining to June 15th. Our representatives are available to respond to questions, and the staff recommendation is to receive the brief for information.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor?
Just run the table.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Asmundson for around the table.
Well, thank you very much. Just want to raise an issue that I think is, well, happened to me, happened to my residents in where I live. We have a super mailbox, about 27 of us. I went to get my mail, and from about Tuesday to Friday, there was no mail. So on the Monday later, I was coming to council, and I noticed the postal van turn away from our box. I noticed a truck, there's construction, parked in front of the mailboxes. Thought, okay, I'll talk to the guys tomorrow about parking their trucks so we can get our mail. Well, I get informed that our box has been broken into. There was a bag of mail in a plastic bag that somebody rifled through. So next day I phoned Canada Post, explained the situation, why we aren't getting our mail. They said they'd do an investigation. I said, okay, fine. Still didn't get our mail. That was going to be 5 to 6 working days, and it took 6 working days for them to get back to me. At no time were we ever told that there had been mail theft from our area. You're talking about personal private information for 27 people. I called our Superintendent Wilcott of the RCMP to ask him if he knew of any reports of theft in our area. He got back to me and said, the Canada Post has not reported any of this to us at the RCMP. As he said, if they did, we would probably know some of the prime suspects and go after them, but Canada Post had not informed them about it. I got an email from Canada Post basically saying the investigation, mail delivery has been restored, and this investigation is now closed. Nothing about the mail theft. None of the people in our boxes have ever been informed that that's happened. And you're talking about private, personal, confidential information. I just think that is terrible, and I think it speaks to a lot of our concerns, people that have super mailboxes, and Canada Post's how they treat us in our private information. Maybe we should have door-to-door service to have better security again. But I just want to raise that because I think it's a really important issue, and Canada Post is not serving the people and their customers very well at all. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, when I raised this issue with Canada Post 2 years ago because of the rash of theft, the answer we got back was that they're testing a new theft-proof super mailbox. I said, you're testing one? How on earth will that help? No one's going to try to break into the most secure one. They're going to keep breaking into the old ones, and you're at the end of the 2-year, and here we are 2 years later, that one hasn't been broken into yet, I guess, but others have been, and the time has come for Canada Post either to fix this problem or start delivering the mail to the door. There's too much at risk. There's way too much at risk for the amount of personal information that gets mailed to us to be put out in the open and to be constantly at risk of being stolen. Canada Post owes it to our residents and others to fix this problem. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you, Mayor. You're through with that item. I got a notice of motion. I'd like the clerk to read it out. Go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora has moved and Councillor Reid has seconded a notice of motion pertaining to parking permit program for people with disabilities, and a request that the City of Coquitlam write a letter to the Province of British Columbia and the Social Planning and Research Council, SPARC, regarding the parking permit program for people with disabilities, requesting that a review of the policies and procedures associated with the issuance and enforcement of permits be undertaken in order to reduce the misuse, abuse of accessible parking spaces. And that will be put on the agenda of the next council meeting.
Sounds like it would have come through a disabilities committee or something. It's been brought up. Okay. Anything else? Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Aspenson to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. As is our custom.